In the small town of Maplewood, life at Lincoln High School was usually quiet and predictable. The hallways buzzed with the usual chatter of students rushing between classes, trying to avoid being late or getting caught up in unnecessary drama. For most kids, high school was just a place where they spent their days waiting for the final bell to ring so they could head home or hang out with friends. But for some students, it wasn't that simple. Emily was one of those students who didn't quite fit into the normal crowd. She had been in a wheelchair ever since an accident 2 years ago left her unable to walk. Despite everything she'd been through, Emily tried her best to stay positive and focus on her studies. She loved learning and always made sure her assignments were done on time. But no matter how hard she worked or how much effort she put into blending in, there were always people who couldn't see past her wheelchair. Jake was one of them. He was the kind of guy everyone knew, the loud, confident type who thrived on attention, whether it was scoring touchdowns on the football field or cracking jokes in the cafeteria. Jake always seemed to be at the center of things. But beneath his charming smile lay a darker side. He liked feeling powerful, and sometimes he used that power in ways that hurt others. To him, picking on someone weaker felt like an easy way to boost his ego. It was a regular Tuesday morning when everything changed. Emily was making her way down the hallway during the short break between classes. Her bag was slung over the back of her wheelchair, and she carefully navigated through the crowded space, trying not to bump into anyone. As she passed by a group of students near the lockers, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Hey, look, who's rolling through?" Jake called out, his tone dripping with mockery. A few nearby students snickered, glancing at Emily but quickly looking away. They didn't want to get involved. No one ever did. Emily kept moving, keeping her eyes straight ahead. She was used to this kind of thing by now. Over the past couple of years, she'd learned to tune out the comments and ignore the stares. But today, Jake wasn't content with just words. As Emily rolled past him, he stuck out his foot and gave her wheelchair a hard shove from behind. The impact sent Emily tumbling forward. Her wheelchair tipped over, spilling her books and notebooks across the floor. For a moment, all she could do was sit there, stunned, as pain shot through her arms from breaking her fall. Tears welled up in her eyes, not just from the physical ache, but from the humiliation of being knocked down right in front of everyone. Around her, the hallway erupted in laughter. Some students pointed and whispered, while others simply walked past without even glancing down. It was as if they didn't see her at all. Teachers standing nearby hesitated, unsure whether to step in or let the situation play out on its own. No one came to help. But then, something unexpected happened. Across the hall, a boy who had been watching silently stepped forward. He was tall and lean, with dark skin and a calm expression that masked the storm brewing inside him. Unlike many of the other students, he hadn't laughed or turned away. Instead, he'd seen exactly what had happened, and he wasn't about to let it slide. Without saying a word, he crossed the hallway and knelt beside Emily. Gently, he began picking up her scattered books and papers, stacking them neatly before placing them back in her bag. His movements were deliberate, almost protective, as if shielding her from further harm. "You're okay," he said softly, his voice steady and reassuring. "I've got you." For Emily, those simple words meant more than he could have imagined. In that moment, she realized she wasn't completely alone. Someone had noticed. Someone cared. But Jake hadn't missed any of this either. Seeing the boy step in infuriated him. How dare someone interfere? Who did he think he was? "What's your problem?" Jake snapped, taking a step closer. "Stay out of it." Instead of backing down, the boy looked up, meeting Jake's glare head-on. There was no fear in his eyes, only determination. "My problem?" he replied, his voice rising slightly. "My problem is watching someone like you pick on someone who can't fight back. That makes you nothing but a bully." The hallway fell silent. All eyes were on the two boys now. What would happen next? Would the newcomer stand his ground, or would Jake's reputation intimidate him into silence? No one moved. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see how this moment would unfold. Jake's face twisted into a sneer as he took another step closer to the boy who had dared to challenge him. The tension in the hallway was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone could feel it, the kind of electric charge that comes right before something big happens. Jake wasn't used to being talked back to, especially not in front of an audience. His reputation as the school's untouchable jock meant people either feared him or worshipped him. But this boy didn't seem to care about any of that. "You think you're brave, huh?" Jake growled, his voice low and menacing. He flexed his broad shoulders, trying to intimidate the other boy with sheer size alone. It was a tactic that usually worked, but today felt different. This time, the boy standing in front of him didn't flinch. Instead, the boy rose slowly to his full height, meeting Jake's glare without blinking. There was no trace of fear in his eyes, just a quiet strength that made Jake pause for half a second. That brief hesitation was all the crowd needed to realize something extraordinary was unfolding. For once, someone wasn't backing down. "Brave?" the boy repeated, his tone calm but firm. "No, I'm not brave. I'm just doing what everyone else should have done a long time ago, standing up for someone who deserves better than what you just did." The words hit like a punch. Around them, students shifted uncomfortably, guilt flickering across their faces. They knew he was right. Most of them had seen Jake shove Emily's wheelchair over, and none of them had said a word. Some had even laughed. Now here was this boy calling them out, not just Jake, but all of them for letting it happen. Jake clenched his fists, his patience wearing thin. "You don't know anything about me," he spat, leaning in aggressively. "Stay out of my business." But the boy didn't budge. If anything, he stood taller, his jaw tightening as he held Jake's gaze. "Oh, I know plenty," he shot back, his voice rising now so everyone could hear. "I know you get off on making people feel small because it makes you feel big. But guess what? That doesn't make you tough. It makes you weak." The hallway erupted into murmurs. Students exchanged wide-eyed glances, unsure whether to cheer or stay silent. No one had ever spoken to Jake like this before. Not in public, anyway. Even the teachers lingering nearby seemed frozen, watching the scene unfold with a mix of shock and curiosity. Jake's face turned red, partly from anger and partly from embarrassment. He hated being called out, especially in front of so many people. Without thinking, he lunged forward and shoved the boy hard against the lockers. The metallic clang echoed through the corridor, drawing gasps from the crowd. For a moment, everything stopped. The boy staggered slightly but quickly regained his footing. He looked at Jake, his expression unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "You really want to do this?" the boy asked quietly, though his voice carried clearly in the hushed hallway. "Because if you're looking for a fight, I'm ready." Jake hesitated again, but only for a split second. His pride wouldn't let him back down now. With a snarl, he swung his fist toward the boy's face, but instead of ducking or cowering, the boy reacted instantly. He blocked the punch with one arm and countered with a swift strike of his own, landing a solid blow to Jake's stomach. The impact sent Jake stumbling backward, clutching his midsection. Shock rippled through the crowd. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Jake was the star athlete, the guy who always came out on top. And yet, here he was, doubled over in pain, while the boy stood firm, breathing heavily, but unshaken. Before either of them could throw another punch, two teachers rushed in, grabbing hold of both boys and pulling them apart. "Enough!" one of them shouted, her voice sharp with authority. "Office, now!" As the teachers dragged them away, the hallway remained eerily quiet. Students stared after them, processing what they'd just witnessed. For years, Jake had ruled the school with an iron fist, unchecked and unchallenged. But today, someone had finally stood up to him, and won. In the principal's office, the atmosphere was tense. Jake sat slumped in a chair, still nursing his bruised ego while glaring daggers at the boy across from him. The boy, on the other hand, looked calm, almost too calm for someone who had just been involved in a physical altercation. Principal Davis, a stern woman in her 50s with glasses perched on the edge of her nose, studied both of them carefully. "All right," she began, folding her hands on the desk. Someone explained to me what happened. Jake wasted no time jumping in. "He attacked me," he exclaimed, pointing accusingly at the boy. "I didn't do anything wrong. He just started hitting me for no reason." Principal Davis raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. She turned to the boy. "Is that true?" The boy shook his head. "No, ma'am. That's not how it went down. Jake shoved a girl in a wheelchair earlier, Emily. He knocked her over and laughed about it. When I tried to help her, he got mad and started threatening me. Then he shoved me into the lockers and threw the first punch." Principal Davis sighed deeply, pinching the bridge of her nose. These kinds of incidents were always complicated, especially when emotions ran high. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. One of the teachers who had witnessed the hallway confrontation stepped inside, followed by several students, including Emily herself. "We saw what happened," the teacher explained, addressing Principal Davis. "Jake did shove Emily, and when this young man tried to intervene, Jake became aggressive. We believe he acted in self-defense." Principal Davis nodded slowly, turning her attention back to Jake. "Is that true, Jake? Did you knock Emily over?" Jake opened his mouth to deny it, but faltered when he saw Emily sitting there, her hands gripping the wheels of her chair tightly. Her expression was calm, but there was a steely determination in her eyes that made it impossible for him to lie. Reluctantly, he muttered, "Yeah, but it was just a joke. I didn't mean to hurt her." "A joke?" Emily spoke up, her voice trembling but strong. "It didn't feel like a joke when I fell. It didn't feel funny when everyone laughed at me. You humiliated me, Jake. And you've been doing stuff like that to me and to other people for years. Why does it have to take someone standing up for me for anyone to notice?" Her words hung heavy in the air. Jake looked away, unable to meet her gaze. For the first time, he seemed genuinely uncomfortable, as if the weight of his actions was finally sinking in. Principal Davis leaned back in her chair, considering everything she'd heard. Finally, she spoke. "Jake, you're suspended for a week. During that time, you'll attend counseling sessions focused on empathy and respect. As for you," she glanced at the boy, "while fighting isn't acceptable under any circumstances, your intentions appear to have been honorable. However, you'll serve 1 day of detention for engaging in a physical altercation." The decision sparked mixed reactions. Jake scowled, muttering under his breath about how unfair it was, while the boy simply nodded, accepting the punishment without complaint. Outside the office, the group of students waiting anxiously erupted into quiet cheers. Someone had finally stood up to Jake and gotten away with it. Later that afternoon, as the boy walked out of the office, he found Emily waiting for him near the main doors. She smiled shyly, holding out a crumpled piece of paper. "Thank you," she said softly, "for helping me, and for saying those things back there. I've never had anyone stick up for me like that before." The boy accepted the note, returning her smile. "You shouldn't have to thank me," he replied. "People like Jake only get away with stuff like that because we let them. Maybe it's time we start changing that." Emily nodded, her smile widening. Together, they headed toward the exit, leaving behind a school that might never be the same again. The days following the incident in the hallway were anything but ordinary at Lincoln High School. News of what had happened spread like wildfire, and by lunchtime that same day, it felt like everyone was talking about it. The boy who had stood up to Jake became an unexpected symbol of courage for many students. For years, Jake's behavior had gone unchecked, and while some people whispered behind his back or rolled their eyes at his antics, no one had ever dared to confront him directly. Until now. For Emily, life at school began to shift in ways she hadn't anticipated. After spending so much time feeling invisible or worse, like a target, she suddenly found herself surrounded by support. Classmates who had once ignored her started saying hello in the hallways. A few even offered to help carry her books or hold doors open for her. It wasn't just polite gestures either. There was genuine warmth in their actions, as if they were finally seeing her as more than the girl in the wheelchair. But not everyone reacted positively. Some students defended Jake, claiming he was just joking around and didn't deserve to be called out. They argued that the boy had overreacted and shouldn't have resorted to violence. While these opinions made Emily uneasy, she tried to focus on the positives. She reminded herself that change rarely came without resistance, and this was no exception. Meanwhile, the boy who had stepped in was dealing with his own mix of emotions. He hadn't expected the attention that followed his actions. Walking through the halls, he noticed heads turning as people whispered about him. Some looked at him with admiration, others with curiosity, and a few with thinly veiled hostility. Despite the spotlight, he remained grounded. He hadn't done what he did for recognition or praise. He'd done it because it was the right thing to do. Still, the aftermath of the fight weighed on him. Detention wasn't fun, but that wasn't what bothered him most. What kept him up at night was wondering whether standing up to Jake would actually make a difference in the long run. Would Jake learn anything from his suspension and counseling sessions? Or would he return to school unchanged, ready to pick on someone else? Emily often thought about the same question. One afternoon, as she sat with the boy during study hall, she voiced her concerns. "Do you think Jake will really change?" she asked, fidgeting with the strap of her bag. "Or is this just going to blow over, and everything will go back to how it was?" The boy hesitated before answering. He wanted to reassure her, but he also didn't want to sugarcoat things. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "Maybe he'll realize what he did was wrong, but even if he doesn't, maybe other people will. If enough of us decide we're not going to let stuff like this slide anymore, then maybe things can start to change. For good." His words stuck with Emily. She realized that while Jake's behavior mattered, it wasn't the only thing that did. What truly mattered was how the rest of them responded. If they chose to stay silent and look away, nothing would improve. But if they chose to speak up and stand together, maybe they could create something better. As the week went on, the ripple effects of the incident continued to unfold. Jake returned to school after serving his suspension, looking noticeably subdued. Gone was the cocky swagger he used to carry. Instead, he moved through the halls quietly, avoiding eye contact with anyone who glanced his way. Rumors circulated that his parents had grounded him for weeks and forced him to attend family therapy sessions alongside his school-mandated counseling. Whether or not those rumors were true, one thing was clear. Jake wasn't the same guy who had shoved Emily's wheelchair over just a few days earlier. Some students felt sorry for him, believing he'd been punished enough. Others weren't convinced he'd truly changed. "He's probably just pretending to be sorry," one student muttered during lunch. "Once everyone forgets about this, he'll go right back to being a jerk." Despite the skepticism, a small group of students decided to give Jake a chance. Among them was the boy who had stood up to him. It wasn't easy. Every instinct told him to keep his distance, but he believed in second chances. If Jake was serious about changing, then shutting him out completely wouldn't help anyone. One afternoon, the boy approached Jake near the gymnasium. Jake froze when he saw him coming, clearly unsure what to expect. "Hey," the boy said casually, stopping a few feet away. "How's it going?" Jake shrugged, staring at the floor. "Fine, I guess." An awkward silence stretched between them before the boy spoke again. "Look, I'm not here to argue or start anything. I just wanted to say, I hope you're taking this seriously. You've got a lot of power in this school, whether you realize it or not. How you use it matters." Jake's jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get it. I messed up. Big time." He paused, glancing around nervously before adding, "I never meant for things to go that far. I didn't stop to think about how it affected people." The boy studied him carefully, searching for any sign of insincerity. All he saw was vulnerability, a side of Jake he doubted many people had ever seen. "It's not too late to fix it," he said finally. "Apologize to Emily, mean it, and then show everyone you're serious about changing. Actions speak louder than words." Jake hesitated, then nodded again. "Okay, I'll try." True to his word, Jake sought out Emily later that week. She was sitting alone in the library, flipping through pages of a textbook. When she looked up and saw him standing there, her expression hardened instantly. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sharp. Jake swallowed hard, shifting uncomfortably. I wanted to say I'm sorry for what I did. Knocking you over, laughing at you. It was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you like that." Emily stared at him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. For a moment she didn't say anything. Then softly she replied, "Sorry doesn't undo what happened. But if you really mean it, prove it. Change the way you treat people. That's the only apology I care about." Jake nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "I will," he promised. "I swear." Whether or not Jake would follow through remained to be seen, but Emily decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. For now. Deep down, she hoped he would rise to the challenge. If he did, it could mean a brighter future not just for her, but for everyone at Lincoln High. In the weeks that followed, a quiet transformation began to take root within the school. Inspired by the boys' bravery and Emily's resilience, a group of students came together to form a coalition aimed at promoting kindness and inclusion. They called themselves Stand Together, a name chosen to reflect their mission, standing up for one another and refusing to let bullying or discrimination go unchallenged. Their first initiative was simple, yet powerful. They organized a kindness wall in the cafeteria, where students could write notes of encouragement or gratitude to their peers. At first, only a handful of people participated, but soon, the wall was covered in colorful sticky notes filled with heartfelt messages. Teachers and staff joined in too, adding their own words of support. The impact was undeniable. Students who had once felt isolated or overlooked began to feel seen and valued. Friendships formed between unlikely pairs, and tensions that had simmered beneath the surface for years started to ease. Even Jake surprised everyone by contributing to the wall, writing a note that read, "To Emily, thank you for giving me a chance to do better." While challenges still existed, the atmosphere at Lincoln High grew steadily more positive. The boy who had sparked this change watched it all unfold with a quiet sense of pride. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but he also knew that every step forward mattered. Together, they were proving that even the smallest acts of courage could lead to big changes. As the weeks turned into months, the ripple effects of that fateful day in the hallway continued to shape life at Lincoln High School. The Stand Together coalition grew stronger with each passing week, becoming more than just a group of students. It became a movement. What started as a simple idea to promote kindness and inclusion evolved into something much bigger, a cultural shift within the school. People were talking about it, thinking about it, and most importantly, acting on it. The boy who had stood up to Jake found himself at the center of this transformation, though he never sought the spotlight. He wasn't comfortable being labeled a hero or a leader, but his actions had inspired others to step forward in ways they never imagined. Students who had once been bystanders, silent witnesses to bullying or injustice, began speaking out. They realized their voices mattered, and together they could create real change. Emily played a key role in this too. After years of feeling invisible or dismissed, she embraced her newfound visibility with grace and determination. She didn't want sympathy, she wanted action. So, alongside the boy and other members of Stand Together, she worked tirelessly to organize events, workshops, and discussions aimed at fostering empathy and understanding. Their message was clear. No one should have to face cruelty alone, and everyone deserved to feel safe and valued. One of the coalition's most impactful initiatives was hosting a school-wide assembly called Voices Unheard. The goal was simple yet profound: to give a platform to students who rarely got the chance to share their stories. On the day of the event, the auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Rows of chairs filled quickly, and even teachers showed up early, eager to see what their students had planned. When the lights dimmed and the first speaker took the stage, the room fell silent. It was Emily. She sat in her wheelchair, gripping the microphone tightly as she looked out at the sea of faces before her. For a moment she hesitated, nerves threatening to overwhelm her, but then she remembered why she was there. not just for herself but for everyone else who had ever felt unseen or unheard. "I've spent a lot of time wishing I could disappear," she began, her voice soft but steady. "Not because I wanted to stop existing, but because I wanted to escape the way people treated me. When you're different in any way, you become a target. People laugh at you, talk behind your back, or worse, pretend you don't exist." Her words struck a chord with many in the audience. Some nodded knowingly, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, recognizing their own complicity in moments like these. Emily went on to describe the day Jake had knocked her over, the fear, the humiliation, and the isolation she'd felt when no one stepped in to help. Her vulnerability brought tears to several eyes, including those of former bullies who had mocked her without a second thought. "But then," she continued, her voice growing stronger, "someone did step in. Someone saw me. Not just my wheelchair, but me. And because of that, I realized I wasn't alone. None of us are. We all have the power to make a difference, whether it's standing up for someone being bullied or simply choosing kindness when it's easier to look away." When Emily finished speaking, the auditorium erupted into applause. Many students stood, clapping enthusiastically, while others wiped away tears. The next speaker, a shy freshman who had struggled with anxiety since middle school, shared how isolating it felt to be labeled weird or too quiet. Another student talked about the challenges of coming from a low-income family and facing judgment from classmates who didn't understand what it was like to worry about having enough food at home. Each story was unique, yet they all carried a common thread: the longing to belong, to be accepted for who they truly were. By the end of the assembly, the mood in the auditorium had shifted entirely. Conversations spilled into the hallways as students discussed what they'd heard and how it made them feel. Some admitted guilt, acknowledging times they had contributed to someone else's pain. Others expressed gratitude, saying the event had opened their eyes to struggles they hadn't considered before. Teachers remarked on the palpable sense of unity that seemed to fill the school, a shared commitment to doing better. Jake, meanwhile, was navigating uncharted territory. His apology to Emily had been sincere, but proving he meant it was another challenge altogether. At first, skepticism followed him wherever he went. Old habits die hard, and many students doubted whether he could truly change. Even Jake himself questioned whether he was capable of breaking free from the toxic patterns he'd fallen into. But slowly, he began taking steps toward redemption. He joined Stand Together, not because he felt obligated to, but because he genuinely believed in its mission. At first, his presence raised eyebrows. Some members were hesitant to trust him, fearing he might revert to his old ways if given the chance. But Jake persisted, showing up to meetings, volunteering for projects, and listening intently when others shared their experiences. One project in particular allowed Jake to demonstrate his growth. The coalition decided to create a peer mentoring program where older students helped younger ones navigate the challenges of high school life. Jake signed up immediately, pairing with a timid 8th grader named Alex who had recently transferred to Lincoln High. Alex reminded Jake of himself at that age, awkward, unsure, and desperate to fit in. Through their weekly meetings, Jake learned to listen without judgment and offer advice rooted in empathy rather than ego. Over time, Alex began opening up, sharing his fears and dreams with Jake, who responded with encouragement and support. Seeing Jake mentor Alex gave others hope that real change was possible. If someone like Jake, a former bully, could transform, then maybe anyone could. His journey served as a powerful reminder that redemption wasn't reserved for perfect people. It was available to anyone willing to put in the work. As the school year progressed, the culture at Lincoln High continued to evolve. Teachers noticed a decline in disciplinary issues, particularly incidents involving bullying. Students reported feeling safer and more connected to their peers. Even small gestures like holding doors open or offering a kind word became commonplace. These seemingly minor acts added up, creating an environment where kindness thrived and negativity struggled to take root. The boy who had sparked this change remained humble throughout it all. He didn't seek recognition or praise, but he couldn't deny the impact his actions had made. One afternoon, As he walked through the halls, he overheard a conversation between two freshmen discussing the Stand Together coalition. One of them said, "It's crazy how one person can change so much. If he hadn't stood up to Jake, none of this would have happened." The boy smiled to himself, feeling a quiet sense of pride. He knew it wasn't just him, though. Change had come because hundreds of students had chosen to join forces, amplifying his initial act of courage. It wasn't about one hero. It was about a community working together. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Was this progress permanent? Or would things slip back to how they used to be once people moved on? The boy pushed those thoughts aside, reminding himself of something Emily had said during one of their meetings. Change doesn't happen overnight, but every step forward counts, no matter how small. With that mindset, the students of Lincoln High kept moving forward, determined to build a brighter future, one act of kindness at a time. As the school year rolled on, the changes at Lincoln High weren't just surface level. They were beginning to seep into the very fabric of daily life. The Stand Together coalition had become more than a club or an initiative. It was now a cornerstone of the school's identity. Students who had once been divided by cliques, rumors, and judgment were starting to bridge gaps they hadn't even realized existed. Conversations that might have ended in arguments before were now turning into opportunities for understanding. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension and misunderstandings, but the overall atmosphere felt lighter, kinder, and more hopeful. The boy who had stood up to Jake continued to play a quiet but steady role in keeping the momentum alive. He didn't want to be the face of the movement, but he couldn't step away entirely either. Every time he saw someone hesitating to join a conversation or struggling to fit in, he reminded himself why he'd stepped into that hallway months ago. His actions hadn't just changed Emily's life. They'd sparked something bigger, something that kept growing because people believed in it. Emily, too, found herself stepping into a leadership role she never thought she'd embrace. For years, she had stayed in the background, avoiding attention and trying to blend in as much as possible. But now she realized her voice carried weight. Not because she was special, but because others could relate to her story. She became one of the driving forces behind Stand Together, organizing events, brainstorming ideas, and encouraging others to speak up when they felt unheard. One of their boldest projects yet was a day of listening. The idea came from a casual conversation during one of their meetings. Someone mentioned how hard it was to truly listen to someone else without interrupting, judging, or offering unsolicited advice. From there, the concept grew. What if they dedicated an entire day to simply listening to each other, to teachers, to parents, and even to themselves? On the morning of the day of listening, posters decorated the hallways with simple reminders like "Listen without interrupting" and "Hear their story." Teachers incorporated short activities into their classes, asking students to pair up and share something personal while practicing active listening. In the cafeteria, tables were rearranged so students from different grades and social groups could sit together, fostering connections that might not otherwise happen. By lunchtime, the energy in the school was electric. At one table, a senior athlete sat next to a freshman artist, discovering they both loved old-school hip-hop music. At another, two girls who had barely spoken before bonded over their shared love of baking. Even Jake participated, sitting quietly, as Alex, the shy 8th grader he mentored, talked about his dream of becoming a writer. For the first time in a long time, the noise of the cafeteria wasn't just chatter. It was connection. But perhaps the most powerful moment of the day happened during a small group discussion led by Emily. A junior named Mia, known for being outspoken and confident, admitted something surprising. She often felt lonely despite having plenty of friends. "I think I talk so much because I'm scared of silence," she confessed. "If I stop talking, will anyone notice me?" Her honesty stunned the group. Slowly, others began sharing similar feelings: fears of rejection, doubts about belonging, and struggles with self-worth. By the end of the session, tears flowed freely, but so did laughter. People hugged, exchanged numbers, and promised to check in on each other more often. It was raw, messy, and beautiful, a reminder that everyone carries burdens no one else Can see. Jake's journey toward redemption remained a work in progress, but he was making strides that surprised even himself. He started volunteering at a local community center after school, helping younger kids with homework and coaching them in basketball. It wasn't glamorous work, and sometimes it felt awkward, but it gave him a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. The kids looked up to him, not because he was a star athlete, but because he showed up consistently and cared about their success. At Lincoln High, Jake also took on responsibilities within Stand Together. He helped organize fundraisers, distributed flyers, and even facilitated some of the peer mentoring sessions. When skeptics questioned whether he deserved a second chance, he didn't argue back. Instead, he let his actions speak for themselves. Over time, more people warmed up to him, though not everyone fully trusted him yet, and that was okay. Jake understood trust had to be earned, not demanded. One afternoon, after a particularly tough mentoring session with Alex, Jake pulled the boy aside. "Hey man, you doing all right?" he asked, noticing Alex seemed unusually quiet. Alex shrugged, staring at the floor. "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'll never measure up, you know? Like no matter what I do, it won't be good enough." Jake nodded thoughtfully. He knew exactly how that felt. "Yeah, I get it," he said. "But here's the thing. You don't have to compare yourself to anyone else. Just focus on being better than you were yesterday, that's all that matters." His words must have resonated because Alex cracked a small smile. "Thanks," he muttered. "That actually helps." Moments like these reminded Jake why he was putting in the effort. Helping someone else find confidence made him feel like maybe he could rebuild his own. Meanwhile, the boy and Emily continued working closely together, their friendship deepening with each passing week. They spent hours planning events, brainstorming new ways to keep the momentum going and reflecting on how far they'd come. One evening, as they sat on the bleachers after practice, Emily turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in that day?" she asked. "Like, would things still be the same? Or would someone else have eventually done something?" He leaned back, considering her question. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe nothing would have changed. Or maybe someone else would have stepped up later. But I do know this. If we wait around for someone else to fix things, nothing ever gets better. Change happens when people decide they're tired of staying silent." Emily smiled softly, nodding. "You're right, and I guess I'm glad you got tired of staying silent when you did." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Neither of them needed to say it out loud. They both knew they were part of something bigger than themselves, something that mattered. As the semester drew to a close, the students of Lincoln High prepared for their annual spring fair, a tradition that usually involved carnival games, food trucks, and performances. This year, however, Stand Together added a new element, a wall of gratitude. Students were invited to write thank you notes to anyone who had made a positive impact on their lives, teachers, classmates, family members, or even strangers. On the day of the fair, the wall of gratitude quickly became the main attraction. Hundreds of colorful sticky notes covered its surface, each one bearing a heartfelt message. Some were funny. "Thanks for always stealing my fries. You make lunch less boring." While others were deeply moving. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Among the notes was one addressed to the boy who had stood up to Jake. It read simply, "Thank you for reminding us that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing the right thing even when you're scared." When he found it, he smiled faintly, tucking the note into his pocket. Courage wasn't something he claimed to understand completely, but if his actions had inspired others to be brave too, then maybe he was heading in the right direction. By the end of the year, Lincoln High wasn't perfect, but it was better. Friendships had formed where none had existed before. Conversations had shifted from gossip to genuine curiosity about each other's lives. And while challenges remained, the students had proven they were capable of creating change when they worked together. As the final bell rang on the last day of school, the boy walked out of the building alongside Emily. Neither of them spoke, but they didn't need to. They both knew they had played a part in shaping something meaningful, not just for themselves but for everyone around them. Whatever came next, they were ready to face it, together. The months flew by, and before anyone realized it, graduation season was upon Lincoln High School. For the seniors, this was a time of mixed emotions, excitement for what lay ahead, nostalgia for moments past, and a bittersweet awareness that their chapter at Lincoln was coming to an end. But for the boy who had stood up to Jake, this milestone felt especially significant. He hadn't expected his final year to unfold the way it did, but looking back, he couldn't imagine it any other way. Graduation day arrived with clear skies and warm sunshine, setting the perfect tone for the ceremony. Families filled the bleachers, snapping photos and chatting excitedly as students lined up in their caps and gowns. The air buzzed with anticipation, laughter, and the occasional nervous giggle. As the procession began, the boy found himself walking alongside Emily. She looked radiant, her smile lighting up the entire field despite the challenges she'd faced throughout high school. When they reached their seats, Emily leaned over slightly and whispered, "Can you believe we made it?" Her voice carried a mix of pride and disbelief. He grinned, nodding. "Yeah, I can. It's kind of crazy though, isn't it? Everything that's happened since, well, you know." She laughed softly, understanding exactly what he meant. Neither of them needed to say it out loud. The hallway confrontation, the Stand Together coalition, the countless hours spent fighting for change, they were all part of their shared journey. And now, sitting here on the brink of adulthood, they could see how far they'd come, not just individually but as a community. As the principal took the stage to deliver opening remarks, the crowd quieted down. After thanking teachers, parents, and staff, she paused, glancing at the sea of graduates before continuing. "This year has been unlike any other," she said, her voice steady and sincere. "Our students have shown incredible resilience, compassion, and leadership. They've taught us that even in the face of adversity, we have the power to create positive change." Her eyes scanned the audience until they landed on the boy. One student in particular reminded us of the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. His courage inspired others to follow suit, sparking a movement that transformed not only our school but also the lives of everyone involved. The boy shifted uncomfortably in his seat, feeling the weight of attention settle on him. He wasn't used to being singled out like this, but he knew better than to try to deflect the praise. Instead, he sat taller, letting the moment wash over him. Around him, his classmates erupted into applause, cheering loudly as if to remind him and themselves that none of this would have been possible without collective effort. After the principal finished speaking, it was time for the valedictorian address. To no one's surprise, the honor went to the boy. As he stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted again, this time with whistles and shouts of encouragement. He adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, and began. "Good morning, everyone," he started, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "First, let me say thank you to our families, teachers, and friends for supporting us every step of the way. Without you, none of us would be sitting here today." He paused, glancing at the rows of familiar faces. Then, with a small smile, he added, "But this speech isn't really about me. It's about all of us. Because while I may be standing up here, the truth is, none of this would have happened without each and every one of you." His words resonated deeply, earning nods and murmurs of agreement from the audience. He went on to recount the events of the past year, the fights, the fears, and the friendships that had emerged from adversity. He spoke of Emily's strength, Jake's redemption, and the countless acts of kindness that had turned Lincoln High into a place where everyone belonged. "But here's the thing," he continued, his tone growing more serious. "Change doesn't happen overnight. It takes work, hard work, and it doesn't stop here. When we leave this field today, we're stepping into a world that needs people like us. People who aren't afraid to stand up, speak out, and make a difference." The crowd listened intently, hanging on every word. Parents wiped away tears, teachers nodded proudly, and students exchanged knowing looks. This wasn't just a graduation speech, it was a call to action. Remember, he concluded, his voice rising with conviction, we all have the power to shape the future. Whether it's through small gestures or big movements, we can choose to leave things better than we found them. So as we move forward, let's carry this spirit of unity and courage with us. Let's keep building bridges instead of walls. Because together, we're unstoppable. When he finished, the stadium erupted into thunderous applause. Students jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering as if they never wanted the moment to end. Even the teachers joined in, some wiping away tears as they watched their students celebrate not just academic achievements, but personal growth and transformation. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the graduates gathered at the park for an informal celebration. Music played softly in the background, laughter echoed through the trees, and food trucks lined the edges of the grassy field. Graduates mingled with family and friends, sharing stories and taking endless selfies to capture the magic of the day. Emily wheeled herself over to the boy, holding 2 cups of lemonade. Here, she said, handing him one. You deserve it. He accepted it with a grin, raising his cup in a mock toast. To surviving high school, she chuckled, tapping her cup against his. To surviving and thriving. They sipped their drinks in companionable silence, watching as fireworks lit up the sky above them. Each burst of color seemed to reflect the kaleidoscope of emotions swirling inside them. Joy, gratitude, hope, and maybe a touch of sadness for what they were leaving behind. You know, Emily said after a while, I used to think I'd always be defined by my wheelchair, like it was the first thing people saw when they looked at me, but now, I feel like I'm so much more than that, and it's because of everything we've done together. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. It's funny, isn't it? We didn't set out to change anything, not really. We just wanted to survive. But somehow along the way we ended up changing everything. Emily smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Yeah, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. As the night wore on, Jake approached them hesitantly, balancing a plate of food in one hand. Hey, he said, his voice tentative. Mind if I join you guys? The boy glanced at Emily, who shrugged and gave him a slight nod. Sure, he replied, scooting over to make space. Jake sat down awkwardly, clearly unsure how to start the conversation. Finally, he cleared his throat and looked at the boy. Listen, I just wanted to say thanks for everything. If it weren't for you, I don't think I'd be sitting here today. I probably wouldn't even have graduated. The boy raised an eyebrow, surprised by the sincerity in Jake's voice. Well, credit where it's due. You put in the work too. You didn't give up, and that says a lot. Jake nodded, his gaze dropping to the ground. Still, I owe you. All of you. He gestured toward Emily, then back to the boy. Whatever happens next, I'll remember what I learned here. About kindness, about second chances, yet about doing better. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Emily broke the silence with a soft laugh. Well, if you're planning to stick around and do better, you might as well grab another plate of food. There's plenty to go around. Jake cracked a grin, relaxing visibly. Deal. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the celebrations began winding down. Families packed up blankets and coolers, hugging their graduates tightly before heading home. The boy and Emily lingered a bit longer, unwilling to let the night slip away too quickly. Finally, as the last firework fizzled out in the sky, Emily turned to him. So, what's next for you? He shrugged, smiling wistfully. I guess we'll find out soon enough. But wherever life takes me, I'll always remember this place and everyone here. None of us got through it alone. She nodded, her smile matching his. Same here. Here's to whatever comes next. With that, they shared one last hug before parting ways, each carrying memories and lessons that would stay with them forever. Though their paths might diverge, the bonds they'd forged and the changes they'd created would remain, a testament to the power of courage, kindness, and unity. Lincoln High School wasn't perfect, and neither were its students. But together, they had proven that even in the toughest times, hope could shine brighter than fear, and that was something worth celebrating.